Blood had long since dried on Daniel Reed's knuckles, but he could still feel where the bones had cracked against Draconid armor 3 months ago. 17 of them he had taken down before they finally pinned him to the ground with shock nets and neural disruptors. They called him Demon now. He could hear it in their hissing whispers when they passed his cell. Could see it in how they kept their clawed hands near their weapons even though he was locked behind 6 inches of reinforced crystal. The cell was small, maybe 8 feet by 10 with walls that glowed faintly blue. No windows. No natural light. Just the constant hum of the warship's engines and the knowledge that somewhere beyond these walls, Earth was still fighting. Still bleeding. Daniel sat with his back against the far wall, his injured leg stretched out in front of him. They had set it poorly on purpose, wanting him to remember what resistance cost. He heard the main door open before he saw anyone. 2 guards entered first, their reptilian faces set in expressions of disgust. They wore full armor and carried plasma rifles, which would have been funny if Daniel had any energy left for humor. Behind them came someone different, smaller. The scales that covered her face were deep purple instead of the rust red of soldiers, and her eyes were golden rather than the black pits he had grown used to seeing. She wore robes instead of armor, and she carried a data tablet instead of weapons. "You may wait outside," she said to the guards. Her voice had a musical quality that Daniel had not heard in any Draconid before. "Princess Ashara, regulations state that I am aware of regulations." She did not raise her voice, but something in her tone made the guards go quiet. "I am also aware that this prisoner has been secured in a cell designed to hold creatures 3 times his size and strength. I will be perfectly safe. You may wait outside." The guards exchanged looks but obeyed. The door sealed behind them with a hiss. "Princess." That explained the deference, though it did nothing to explain why royalty would bother visiting the demon in his cage. Daniel watched her approach the energy barrier that separated his cell from the rest of the room. She stopped a careful distance away and studied him with those strange golden eyes. "You are Daniel Reed," she said. It was not a question. Human, male, approximately 30 standard years old, captured during the defense of the colony on Titan's moon. You killed 17 soldiers during your capture and injured 23 others. You survived interrogation techniques that broke 4 other prisoners. You attempted escape twice. She paused, her head tilting slightly. "You terrify my people." Daniel said nothing. He had learned early that silence was the one thing his captors could not take from him. Ashara tapped something on her tablet. "I have been assigned to complete a xenobiological catalog of the human prisoners. My father believes it will be educational for me to understand the species we are at war with." Something flickered across her face, too quick for Daniel to identify. He also believes it is appropriate punishment for speaking against certain policies at court. "Lucky me," Daniel said. His voice came out rough from disuse. "Indeed." Ashara made a note on her tablet. "You are the first human I have been permitted to study. My siblings say humans are little more than animals. Violent, primitive, worthy only of extermination." She looked up from her tablet. "Yet animals do not organize resistance across multiple star systems. Animals do not develop quantum drives in less than a century. Animals do not kill 17 trained soldiers while suffering from 3 broken ribs and a shattered leg." Daniel met her gaze. "What do you want, Princess?" "To understand." She moved closer to the barrier, still maintaining what she probably thought was a safe distance. "Why do you fight? Your world is outmatched. Your weapons are inferior. Your ships are slower. Logic dictates surrender. Yet you resist with a ferocity that baffles our military strategists." "Why?" "Because it's our world," Daniel said simply. "Our home. Our families. You came to take it and we won't let you. It really is that simple." Ashara studied him for a long moment. "Simple," she repeated softly. "Yes, perhaps it is." She made several more notes, then looked around the cell. Her expression changed, became something Daniel could not quite read. "Your food rations are insufficient for your body mass. Your injuries have not been properly treated. The temperature in this cell is set 15 degrees below what your species requires for comfort. Like I said, lucky me. This is unacceptable." Ashara's voice hardened in a way that reminded Daniel she was royalty, even if she was nothing like the brutal warriors he had encountered. "Regardless of war, there are standards, protocols. You are a prisoner, not livestock." She tapped rapidly on her tablet. "I am authorizing medical treatment for your leg and adjustment of environmental controls. Your rations will be increased to appropriate levels. Daniel felt something twist in his chest, suspicion mostly with a dangerous edge of hope beneath it. Why? Because it is right, Ashara said, as if the answer should be obvious. Because you are a sentient being who deserves basic dignity, even as a prisoner of war. Because, she stopped herself, seemed to reconsider her words. Because I am tired of watching my people become monsters in the name of empire. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. I will return tomorrow to continue my research. Please consider cooperating. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I assure you my intentions are not hostile. Your people invaded my world, Daniel said flatly. Your intentions don't really matter. Ashara's shoulders sagged slightly. No, she agreed quietly. I suppose they do not. She left without another word. Daniel sat alone in his cell as the temperature slowly began to rise. His leg throbbed with the promise of pain that proper medical treatment might finally address. The dried blood on his knuckles reminded him of who he was, what he had done. 17 draconids, not enough to save his squad, but enough to earn their fear. The princess had called him Daniel, not demon. She had seen his injuries and called them unacceptable. She had spoken of dignity and standards as if they applied to the enemy. Daniel did not trust her, could not afford to trust anyone who wore the face of his captors. But she had looked at him like he was a person rather than a thing. And that was something he had not experienced since the day Earth fell further behind his prison ship. He closed his eyes and tried not to think about what that small kindness might cost him. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you killed. But as warmth finally began to seep into the cell, Daniel found himself hoping anyway. Not for escape or rescue, but for something simpler and somehow more important. That tomorrow, when the princess returned, she would look at him that same way again. Like he was still human. Like that still mattered. The hum of the engines continued. Beyond the walls, war raged on. But in this small cell, for the first time in months, Daniel Reed allowed himself to believe that not all of his enemies were the same. It was a dangerous thought. It was possibly a foolish thought. But it was his, and they had not managed to take it from him yet. 3 weeks of daily visits had passed before Daniel realized he was teaching the princess to laugh. Not the polite, measured sounds she made at first, but real laughter that made her scales shimmer with color. Changes he was learning to read as emotion. Today she had asked about Earth holidays, and he had described Thanksgiving dinner with his family, complete with his uncle's terrible jokes and his grandmother's even worse cooking. She put salt in the pie instead of sugar. Ashara's eyes widened. But how did she not notice? She was arguing with my aunt about politics and not paying attention, Daniel explained. He sat with his back against the wall, his leg finally healing properly thanks to Ashara's intervention. She sat cross-legged on the floor outside the barrier, her royal robes pooled around her like water. The guards had stopped entering with her after the second week. We all took a bite at the same time. My little cousin actually spit it across the table. Ashara made that sound again, the one that had started as surprise but had slowly transformed into genuine amusement. Your family sounds chaotic. They were. Daniel's smile faded. I don't know if they survived the invasion. The light mood evaporated. Ashara's scales dimmed to a deeper purple. Something Daniel had learned meant sadness or regret. I am sorry. I should not have asked about. It's okay. And strangely it was. It's good to remember them. To talk about them like they were real people instead of just casualties in a war report. Ashara nodded slowly. She had filled dozens of pages in her tablet with notes about human culture, biology, psychology, but Daniel suspected the official catalog was no longer her real purpose for these visits. She came because she wanted to. Because in this cell, away from her court and family, she could be something other than the disappointing fourth daughter who cared more about books than conquest. Tell me about your family, Daniel said. It's only fair. Ashara's expression became guarded. The imperial family is not like human families. We do not have Thanksgiving dinners or terrible jokes. We have hierarchies and expectations and disappointments. You're a disappointment. Daniel could not keep the skepticism from his voice. You're a princess. You speak 17 languages. You understand quantum physics well enough to explain it to me. You care about whether prisoners are treated with basic dignity. How is any of that disappointing? Because I am not a warrior. Ashara's voice went flat. My oldest sister commands a fleet. My brother has conquered 6 systems. My other sister personally killed a rebel leader in single combat, and I study languages and read ancient texts and dare to suggest that perhaps endless expansion is not sustainable policy. She looked down at her hands. My father sent me to catalog you as punishment, to remind me that this is what becomes of those who resist the Empire. Death or captivity, nothing more. Daniel felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and familiar. And did it work? Did seeing me locked in a cage teach you to fall in line? No, Ashara met his eyes. It taught me that my father is wrong, that humans are not animals to be catalogued and disposed of, that perhaps the daughter who questions is not the disappointment after all. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to voice. Daniel had been a prisoner long enough to know that fraternizing with the enemy was dangerous. But Ashara had become more than his captor. She had become something close to a friend, and that realization terrified him almost as much as the constant threat of execution. I need to tell you something, Ashara said suddenly. Her scales had gone pale, almost white. I discovered it yesterday and have been trying to find the courage to speak of it. Daniel's instinct screamed warning. What? My father is planning a demonstration, a public execution of all human prisoners to break Earth's resistance. Ashara's voice shook. You will be first. They want to make an example of the demon. It is scheduled for 10 days from now. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He had known intellectually that this was coming. Prisoners of war did not have long lifespans when their captors were losing. But knowing and hearing it spoken were different things entirely. I see. I will not let it happen. Ashara stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. There has to be something, some law or precedent or... She paced back and forth, her robe swirling. I have been reading the ancient texts. The ones written before the Empire became what it is now. And I found something. Daniel pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the protest from his healing leg. What did you find? A protection clause. Very old, rarely invoked. It states that a prisoner claimed as bonded mate by a member of the royal family cannot be executed without the emperor's direct order, which requires a formal court hearing and evidence of crimes against the throne itself, not just military action. Ashara stopped pacing and turned to face him. It is a loophole, a small one, but it might buy time. Time to find another solution, time to... You want to claim me as your mate? Daniel's voice came out flat. As your husband, yes. Ashara lifted her chin, that royal bearing reasserting itself. It would be a legal fiction. A political maneuver. You would be moved from the prison to the royal wing, given status as consort, protected by law until the hearing, which I could delay for months if I am clever. And what would it cost you? Ashara's scales flickered through several colors before settling on something Daniel did not recognize. Everything. My family's respect, what little I have. My position at court. My father's rage. But you would be alive, and that matters more than... Why? Daniel moved closer to the barrier, as close as he could get. Why does it matter? Why do I matter? I'm your enemy. I killed 17 of your people. Why would you risk everything for me? Because you are a person, not a trophy. Because I have spent 3 weeks learning about your terrible grandmother and your family traditions and your stubborn refusal to break, despite everything they have done to you. Because you treat me like I am intelligent and worthwhile instead of a disappointment. Because... She stopped, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. Because the thought of watching you die makes me wish I had never been born into this empire at all. Daniel stared at her. In the glowing light of the cell, with her scales showing colors he was only beginning to understand, Princess Ashara looked terrified and determined, and heartbreakingly sincere. She was offering him life at the cost of her own freedom. A cage for a cage. And she was asking rather than demanding, giving him the choice that no one had given him since his capture. If I say yes, he said slowly, I become your husband. In the eyes of your people, your law, that's not a small thing. No, it is not. Ashara stepped closer to the barrier, close enough that Daniel could see the fine scales around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly. I know I have no right to ask this of you. I know you have every reason to hate me, to refuse, to let fate take its course rather than tie yourself to one of your captors. But I'm asking anyway because I am selfish and desperate and I cannot think of another way to save you. You're not your father, Daniel said. You're not the Empire. You're just Ashara. The princess who laughs at stories about terrible pie, and who thinks maybe endless war is a bad idea. That's who you are. Ashara's eyes widened. Daniel? Yes. The word came out before he could second guess it. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll be your husband or consort or whatever your law calls it. Not because I want to die, but because you're right. You're selfish and desperate, but so am I. And if there's even a chance that this works, that we can buy time for something better than execution in an arena, then I'll take it. Relief crashed across Ashara's face so powerfully that her scales blazed with color. Thank you. Thank you, I promise I will find a way to… Ashara. Daniel waited until she stopped talking and looked at him. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Not as prisoner and captor, not as human and draconid. As two people trying to survive in a situation neither of us chose, agreed? Agreed. She pressed her hand against the barrier and Daniel mirrored the gesture from his side. Energy hummed between their palms, warm and strange and somehow right. I will arrange the ceremony. It must be tonight before anyone discovers what we are planning. I know a priest who will help us. Tonight, Daniel repeated. 10 days until execution. 0 days until his life changed completely. He should be terrified. Part of him was. But another part, the part that had kept him alive through torture and imprisonment and endless empty days, recognized opportunity when it saw it. Princess Ashara was giving him a chance. Not freedom, not yet, but a chance to survive long enough to find it. And in return, she was asking him to give her what she had given him, recognition as a person rather than a role. It was the strangest trade Daniel had ever made, but as he looked at her determined expression and trembling hands, he thought it might also be the most important. Then let's get married, princess, he said. Let's really mess up your father's day. Ashara smiled, and for the first time since his capture, Daniel Reed allowed himself to hope for something beyond mere survival. He allowed himself to hope for something that looked almost like a future. The priest had kind eyes, which surprised Daniel more than anything else about the midnight ceremony. They met in a forgotten corner of the warship, in what Ashara called an observation shrine where crew members came to meditate during long voyages. Through the transparent wall, stars streaked past in ribbons of light. Daniel wore the simple gray clothing they had given him as a prisoner. Ashara wore robes of deep purple and gold that marked her as royalty. The contrast was not lost on anyone present. This is highly irregular, the priest said. His scales were silver with age, his voice soft and whistling, but not unprecedented. The bond law exists for a reason, even if that reason has been forgotten by most of the court. Will it hold? Ashara's hands were clasped tightly in front of her. Will they honor it? The law is the law, princess. Even your father cannot ignore it without bringing every ancient tradition into question. The empire may have forgotten its honor, but it has not yet abandoned all its foundations. The priest gestured for them to step closer. Are you both certain? The bonding cannot be undone except by death or mutual consent before the full court. It is not a temporary arrangement. Daniel looked at Ashara. In the starlight, her scales gleamed like jewels. She had risked everything to give him this chance, and he knew without asking that she expected nothing in return except his survival. It would have been easy to resent that, to feel like a charity case or a political pawn, but the way she looked at him, nervous and hopeful and trying to hide both, made resentment impossible. I'm certain, he said. As am I, Ashara added. The ceremony itself was short. The priest spoke words in an ancient dialect that Daniel did not understand, though Ashara had tried to explain their meaning earlier. Something about fire and choice and bonds that could not be broken by time or distance. The priest produced a small knife with a handle carved from dark wood, and before Daniel could ask what it was for, Ashara had drawn the blade across her palm. Golden blood welled up, glowing faintly in the dim light. She held out her hand to Daniel. Your blood and mine mixed together. It will create the bond mark and establish the legal connection. It will not hurt, I promise. Daniel took the knife and cut his own palm, wincing at the sharp sting. Red blood mixed with gold as they clasped hands. Heat surged up his arm, not painful but intense, like touching something electric. Ashara gasped, her eyes widening. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a presence that had not been there before. Awareness. Connection. He could feel Ashara's nervousness like an echo of his own heartbeat, could sense her fierce determination and underlying fear. The mark, the priest said quietly. Daniel looked down at his shoulder. Glowing lines had appeared on his skin. forming a pattern that resembled both writing and art. The mark pulsed with the same golden light as Ashara's blood, then slowly faded to a permanent silver that would remain visible against his skin. He touched it carefully. Warm but not burning. Real. It is done, the priest said. By the ancient laws and current statutes, you are bonded. Daniel Reed, you are now consort to Princess Ashara, protected by her bloodline and authority. Princess Ashara, you are bound to this human by choice and ceremony. May your bond bring you both what you seek. The priest left them alone in the observation shrine. Ashara released Daniel's hand and took a step back, suddenly seeming uncertain. How do you feel? The bond sometimes causes discomfort in the first hours. You might sense my emotions more strongly than is comfortable. I can feel you, Daniel admitted. It's strange. Not bad, just strange. Like knowing someone is standing behind you without looking. Yes, exactly like that. It will become easier with time. More natural. Ashara wrapped her arms around herself. I should take you to your new quarters. They are adjacent to mine in the royal wing, much better than the cell, though they will still be monitored. We must be careful. My father will already be planning his response to this. They walked through empty corridors lit by the same blue glow as Daniel's cell had been. Guards nodded to Ashara but stared at Daniel with open hostility. The bond mark was visible on his shoulder, marking him as protected by law but clearly not accepted by tradition. Daniel kept his expression neutral and his hands relaxed. Starting a fight on his wedding night seemed like poor strategy. The royal wing was exactly as Daniel had expected, luxurious and beautiful, and absolutely a prison. His quarters connected to Ashara's through a shared common room, and while the furniture was far better than anything he had seen in months, the cameras in the corners made their purpose clear. He was to be watched, monitored, controlled. The cage had simply gotten larger and prettier. Court will be informed in the morning, Ashara said quietly. She stood in the doorway between their rooms, neither entering nor leaving. There will be consequences. They will say terrible things about both of us. My siblings will mock me. Your fellow prisoners will think you have betrayed them. I am sorry for all of it. Don't apologize for keeping me alive, Daniel said. He sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted from the ceremony and the weight of what they had just done. I'm a soldier. I've been called worse things than a traitor. I can handle whatever they throw at me, but you should not have to. Ashara's frustration bled through the bond, sharp and bitter. You should be home with your terrible grandmother and her salty pie. You should be free to choose your own life, your own partner. Instead, you are trapped here with me, bound by desperation and ancient law to someone you barely know. Daniel looked up at her. The starlight through the windows cast strange shadows across her face, making her seem alien and familiar all at once. I do know you, though. I know you care about languages and old books. I know you think the Empire is wrong, but you are too trapped in it to change things alone. I know you have a good laugh once you let yourself relax. I know you were willing to destroy your own life to save someone you did not have to care about. He paused. That's more than I knew about the person I almost married back on Earth before the war started. Ashara's expression softened. You were engaged? Almost, we talked about it. Then the invasion happened and she evacuated with her family and I joined the military. I got one message from her before communications went dark. She hoped I would be safe. Daniel smiled without humor. Didn't quite work out that way. I am sorry. Yeah, me too. But it's done now. She's probably alive somewhere, living whatever life she could build after Earth fell. And I'm here, married to an alien princess who saved my life with a legal loophole from ancient texts. Life is weird. Weird, Ashara repeated, testing the word. Yes, that is one description for our situation. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Daniel could feel Ashara's exhaustion through the bond, matching his own. The ceremony had taken more out of both of them than they wanted to admit. You should rest, he said finally. Tomorrow is going to be hell. Tomorrow is going to be hell, Ashara agreed. She moved toward her own room, then paused at the threshold. Daniel, thank you for trusting me, for agreeing to this. I know it costs you more than I can understand. You're wrong, Daniel said. You understand exactly what it costs, because it costs you the same. We both gave up our freedom tonight. The difference is you chose to give it up for me, and I chose to give it up for survival. That makes us partners in this mess, whether we planned it or not. Ashara smiled, small and sad and genuine. Partners. I like that better than prisoner and captor. So do I. Good night, Ashara. Good night, Daniel. She disappeared into her room, and Daniel heard the door seal behind her. He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The bond mark on his shoulder tingled faintly, a constant reminder of what he had become. Consort, husband, protected prisoner. The demon in royal clothing. His fellow soldiers would hate him for it if they ever learned. His family would not understand if they still lived. But none of that changed the simple fact that he had bought himself time, and time was the most valuable commodity a prisoner could possess. Through the bond, he could feel Ashara settling into sleep, her consciousness fading to a gentle presence at the back of his mind. She was frightened. She was determined. She was hoping desperately that this gamble would somehow work out. Daniel closed his eyes and let those feelings wash over him. He had been alone for so long, trapped in his own head with nothing but survival instinct and rage to keep him company. The bond was strange and uncomfortable and too intimate for people who barely knew each other. But it was also proof that someone cared whether he lived or died. That someone had looked at the demon and seen a person worth saving. For a man who had lost everything, that was more valuable than freedom. That was hope, fragile and terrifying and real. Daniel Reed fell asleep in luxury for the first time in months, bound by law and blood to an alien princess, marked with silver fire on his shoulder and somehow impossibly grateful. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight he was alive, and after 3 months of captivity, that was enough. Hatred had a taste. Daniel discovered this while standing at the edge of a royal banquet hall, wearing ceremonial robes that marked him as Ashara's consort. While every pair of eyes in the room burned with contempt, it tasted like copper and ash, and it made his survival instincts scream at him to fight or flee. He did neither. Instead, he stood perfectly still with his hands clasped behind his back, the bond mark visible on his shoulder for everyone to see. The human pet. Someone whispered loudly enough to be heard. Laughter followed. Ashara stood beside him. Her scales set in rigid patterns that he had learned meant she was furious but controlling it. "Ignore them," she said softly through the bond. She had taught him to do that in the 3 weeks since their ceremony, to send thoughts and feelings directly without speaking. "They want a reaction. Do not give them one. I'm a soldier," Daniel sent back. "I've dealt with worse than expensive bullies in fancy clothes. My siblings are not mere bullies. They are dangerous." As if summoned by the thought, 3 draconids approached, 2 females and 1 male, all larger than Ashara, all wearing armor even at a formal banquet. The oldest, a female with blood-red scales and scars across her face, stopped directly in front of Daniel. Her eyes were pure black, empty of anything resembling mercy. "So this is the demon." Her voice was deep and rough, smaller than I expected, weaker looking. "Tell me, human, how did you kill 17 of my soldiers while looking so pathetic?" Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "Determination and poor security on your part. If you like, I can demonstrate the techniques." The male sibling laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "It has courage, at least. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." "It has a name," Ashara said coldly. "Daniel. He is my bonded consort and will be treated with respect appropriate to that position." "Respect?" The red-scaled female leaned closer to Daniel, her breath hot against his face. "You bound yourself to this creature because you could not bear to see it properly executed. You have disgraced our family, damaged our reputation, and for what? To save one human when thousands more will die anyway? I expected you to be foolish, little sister, but this exceeds even my lowest expectations." Daniel felt rage surge through the bond from Ashara, hot and bitter. He placed a hand on her arm, a gentle warning. "Your sister saved my life because she believes in justice," he said calmly. "Because she sees prisoners as people rather than problems. You can call that foolish if you want, but it takes more courage to show mercy than to execute the helpless. Any coward can kill someone in chains." The silence that followed was absolute. Every conversation in the hall stopped. The red-scaled princess stared at Daniel as if he had just grown a second head. Then she smiled, showing teeth that could tear through metal. "You dare speak to me of courage? You who killed my soldiers from ambush, who used terrain and trickery rather than honest combat. I used everything I had because I was one human against dozens of your warriors. That's called adaptation. You might want to learn about it, considering humans keep blowing up your fleets despite being outgunned." Daniel kept his voice level, but he could feel Ashara's alarm through the bond. He was pushing too hard, provoking too much. He could not seem to stop. "Your military keeps underestimating us because you think we're primitives. How many more battles do you need to lose before you figure out we're not? The male sibling moved forward, his hand on the weapon at his belt. You will show respect when addressing. Enough! The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Every draconid in the hall immediately fell silent and turned toward the source. The Emperor entered, flanked by guards, his scales a deep purple-black that seemed to absorb light. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his own power, never questioned his own authority. His eyes found Daniel instantly. The human consort, he said. I have heard much about you, Daniel Reed, the demon. The killer. The soldier who refuses to accept defeat even in chains. He approached slowly, each step measured and deliberate. And now, husband to my disappointing daughter. How curious. Father, Ashara began. Silence. The Emperor did not even look at her. His attention remained fixed on Daniel. I wish to hear the human speak. Tell me, Daniel Reed, do you love my daughter? The question was a trap. Daniel could sense it even without the Bond screaming warnings at him. Answer yes, and he looked like a liar trying to legitimize a political marriage. Answer no, and he insulted Ashara publicly. The Emperor was testing him, looking for any excuse to challenge the Bond law and proceed with the execution. I respect her, Daniel said carefully. I am grateful to her. I learn from her every day. Whether that is love, I cannot say. We have been bonded for 3 weeks. Love takes time. Diplomatic, the Emperor said. But you did not answer my question. Do you love her? Yes or no? Daniel felt Ashara's fear through the Bond, sharp and desperate. She thought he would say no. She was already bracing for humiliation, for her father to use his answer as ammunition against her. Daniel looked at the Emperor and made a choice that probably sealed his fate one way or another. Ask me in a year, he said. If we both survive that long, I'll give you an honest answer. Until then, what I feel or do not feel is between me and my wife, not a performance for your court. The Emperor's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect or anger. Daniel could not tell. The silence stretched until it became unbearable, and then the Emperor laughed. It was not a kind sound. You are bold for a prisoner, he said. Perhaps that is why my daughter chose you. She has always preferred the broken things that bite. He turned to Ashara. Your human has courage. Foolish courage that will likely get him killed, but courage nonetheless. Very well, the bond stands. You have your consort. But know this. The ancient laws protect him from execution, but they do not protect him from consequences. He is in my court now, subject to my rules. One misstep, one insult too far, and I will find ways around the bond law. Am I understood? Yes, Father, Ashara said quietly. Good. The Emperor gestured to his guards. The banquet continues. Enjoy yourselves. I am certain my court will find many ways to welcome our new addition. He swept from the hall, taking the oppressive weight of his presence with him. The room exploded with conversation, all of it focused on Daniel and Ashara. The red-scaled sister smiled at Daniel with something that might have been admiration, or might have been the promise of violence. You are brave or stupid. I have not decided which. But you have made this court far more interesting. Welcome to the family, demon. She walked away, her siblings following. Daniel felt like he had just survived combat. His heart raced. His hands wanted to shake. Ashara's distress through the bond made it worse. We need to leave, she sent. Now! They retreated to their quarters, ignoring the whispers that followed them. The moment the door sealed, Ashara rounded on him. What were you thinking? You insulted my sister. You challenged my father. I told the truth, Daniel interrupted. Your sister treats you like garbage. Your father set a trap to humiliate both of us. I was not going to play their games and bow and scrape like a good little prisoner. You are a prisoner. Bond law protects you from execution, not from everything else. They will hurt you, Daniel. They will find ways to punish this pride. Then they punish it. Daniel pulled off the ceremonial robes, hating how they felt on his skin. I spent 3 months in a cell being broken down piece by piece. I killed 17 soldiers to avoid capture and got caught anyway. I have been interrogated, tortured, and treated like an animal. But I am still here. I am still me, and I will not pretend to be less than I am, just to make your family comfortable. They will kill you, Ashara said desperately. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will find a way. Maybe. Daniel sat on the edge of the common room furniture, exhausted. But they will kill me as Daniel Reed, soldier and survivor, not as a pet that learned to heal on command. That has to count for something. Ashara stared at him, her scales flickering through emotions too complex to read. Through the bond, Daniel felt her terror and anger and something else, something that felt almost like pride. "You are impossible," she said finally. "Absolutely impossible. I save your life and you immediately try to throw it away again. I am not throwing it away. I am living it." Daniel looked up at her. "You gave me time, Ashara. Time to be a person instead of a prisoner waiting to die. I am not going to waste that time bowing to people who see me as less than nothing. Even if it means pain, even if it means they hurt you in ways the bond law cannot prevent." Even then, Ashara closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed in her expression. "Then I will protect you as best I can. But Daniel, you must promise me something. You must promise that you will survive, that you will not throw your life away on pride or principle. I did not bond with you just to watch you die anyway." Daniel felt the weight of that promise, the cost of it. "I will survive," he said. "That's what humans do. We adapt, we endure. We refuse to quit even when quitting makes sense. Your family will learn that eventually." "I hope so," Ashara said softly. "For both our sakes, I hope so." She retreated to her room, leaving Daniel alone in the common area. Through the bond, he could feel her crying, trying to muffle the sound so he would not hear. He wanted to go to her to offer comfort, but he did not know how. They were partners in survival, bound by law and desperation, but they were not yet friends. Not really. The bond gave them connection without understanding, proximity without trust. Daniel touched the mark on his shoulder. It glowed faintly in the dim light, proof of a promise made in desperation. He had survived captivity. He had survived torture. He had survived 3 months of isolation and pain. Now he had to survive the imperial court, with all its politics and cruelty and constant threat of violence. Humans were good at surviving. He just had to remember that and hold on long enough for survival to turn into something better, something like freedom, something like hope, something maybe like the partnership Ashara had offered when she had begged him to marry her. Outside the windows, the stars continued their endless march through space. Somewhere out there, Earth still fought. Daniel closed his eyes and held on to that thought like a lifeline. He was not alone. He had Ashara, strange and fierce and terrified. He had time, precious and limited. He had survival instinct honed by months of captivity. It would have to be enough. News traveled faster than light, or at least it felt that way to Daniel when the emergency broadcasts began. He was teaching Ashara basic self-defense in their shared quarters when every screen in the royal wing lit up simultaneously with urgent reports. Earth's forces had destroyed 3 Draconid fleets in coordinated strikes. Dozens of warships lost, thousands of soldiers dead. The humans were not just surviving anymore. They were winning. "Turn it off," Ashara said quietly. Her scales had gone pale, shock written across every line of her body. Daniel did not turn it off. He watched the tactical displays, his soldier's mind automatically analyzing the strategies his people were using. Guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, using asteroids and planetary bodies as cover. The Draconids still had superior numbers and technology, but humans had desperation and creativity. It was exactly what he would have done in their position. 3 fleets, Ashara repeated. "The High Command will be furious. They will demand retaliation. They will demand blood," Daniel corrected. His stomach twisted. "My blood. Every human prisoner's blood." The announcement came within hours. The Emperor declared that all human prisoners, bond law or not, would be executed in 3 days as retribution for the losses. There would be a hearing to challenge the bond law itself, to strip Daniel of his protected status. The message was clear. Ancient traditions meant nothing when the Empire was losing. Daniel felt Ashara's devastation through the bond like a physical wound. "I failed," she whispered. "I promised to keep you safe and I failed." "You kept me safe for 2 months," Daniel said. "That is 2 months I would not have had. 2 months to learn about you, to teach you self-defense, to not be alone in a cell." He pulled her to her feet. "But I am not done surviving yet. Neither are you. What can we do? My father has made his decision. The court will support him. The bond law will be overturned." Daniel's mind raced through possibilities, discarding options as quickly as they appeared. They could run, but the warship was immense and heavily guarded. They could fight, but 2 people against thousands was suicide. They could appeal to the court, but no one would listen. Unless the other prisoners, Daniel said suddenly. How many humans are still held here? I do not know exactly. Perhaps a dozen in the lower decks. Why? Because I am not leaving them to die. If we are going down, we are taking everyone with us. Daniel began moving through the quarters, gathering anything that could be used as a weapon or tool. You have access to restricted areas. You can get to the security systems. And you said there are members of the court who oppose the endless war. A few, very few. They would never openly rebel against the Emperor. They do not need to rebel. They just need to look the other way at the right moment. Daniel found a ceremonial blade on display in Ashara's room, tested its weight. Good enough. We need 3 things. Access to the prison levels, a ship that can reach neutral space, and enough chaos that no one notices until we are gone. Can you do that? Ashara stared at him. You are talking about escaping the Imperial flagship. About breaking out a dozen prisoners and stealing a ship. That is impossible. Humans keep doing impossible things. Your brother said that at the banquet, remember? We are not supposed to win fights against your military, but we do it anyway. Daniel met her eyes. I am not asking you to come with me. I know what that would cost you. Your family, your position, everything you have ever known. But I am asking for your help to give me and the other prisoners a chance. After that, you can stay. Claim I forced you. That I used the bond to control you. Save yourself. No. Ashara's voice was firm. I am not claiming anything. If we do this, I am coming with you. Ashara, you think I want to stay here? In this court that values conquest over compassion? With a father who would execute prisoners to soothe his wounded pride? Her scales blazed with color, fierce and determined. I told you weeks ago that you are a person worth saving. So are the other prisoners. So am I. And I will not stay in a place that has turned me into someone I hate. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, some barrier he had been maintaining since the bonding ceremony crumbling away. You are sure? Once we do this, there is no going back. I have never been more sure of anything. Ashara moved to her personal terminal and began accessing restricted systems. I know where the prisoners are held. I can disable the security temporarily. And I know which council member keeps a courier ship fueled and ready for emergency evacuation. It is small, but it will hold all of us if we crowd together. Then we do this tonight, before the hearing, before they can move the prisoners or increase security. Daniel pulled on darker clothing, abandoning the consort robes forever. We get the prisoners, we get to the hangar, we take the ship. Simple. Simple, Ashara repeated with a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Nothing about this is simple. But yes, tonight, they planned quickly, aware that time was their enemy. Ashara contacted a minor noble named Roth, who had spoken quietly against the war, feeding him false information about needing to inspect the human prisoners for her catalog. She disabled security feeds on a rotating basis, creating gaps in coverage that would look like technical glitches. Daniel memorized the layout of the ship, identifying choke points and escape routes. When night fell according to the ship's artificial cycle, they moved. Ashara led Daniel through corridors he had never seen, using her authority to bypass checkpoints. Guards nodded to her and ignored him, assuming the human consort was simply accompanying his bonded mate. Daniel's heart pounded, but his hands stayed steady. This was combat. This was what he knew. The prison level was exactly as Daniel expected, brutal and efficient. A dozen humans in cells like the one he had lived in for months. They looked up when Daniel and Ashara entered, confusion and suspicion in their eyes. One of them, a woman with scars across her face and military tattoos on her arms, stood slowly. You are the one who married the princess, she said. Her voice was rough with disuse. The traitor. I am the one who is getting you out, Daniel corrected. All of you. Right now. We have maybe 20 minutes before someone notices the security is down. You can hate me later. Right now, move. Ashara opened the cells, her royal access overriding the locks. The prisoners stumbled out, weak from captivity but alert with survival instinct. Follow us, Ashara said. Stay quiet. Stay together. We have a ship waiting. They moved through the ship like shadows, 12 humans and one Draconid princess who had chosen exile over complicity. Daniel led them, his soldiers' training taking over, while Ashara monitored their route through her tablet. Twice they had to hide while patrols passed. Once they had to backtrack when a corridor was unexpectedly sealed. But they kept moving. They were 3 turns from the hangar when the alarm started. Someone had discovered the empty cells. Red lights flashed, and automated announcements began demanding all personnel report to stations. Daniel heard running feet, shouted orders. The window was closing. Run, he said. Everyone run now, they ran. The hangar doors were ahead, massive and sealed. Ashara slapped her hand on the access panel, but it flashed red. Someone has locked it down. I cannot override it. Then we make our own door. Daniel grabbed one of the plasma rifles they had taken from an unmanned weapons locker. Everyone back. He fired at the door mechanism, overloading it with sustained plasma bursts. The metal glowed, warped, and finally exploded outward. Through the smoking gap, Daniel could see the hangar and the courier ship Ashara had identified, but he could also see guards, at least 20 of them, moving to intercept. Go, he told the other prisoners. Get to the ship. I will buy you time. We fight together, the scarred woman said. She took a rifle from another prisoner. No one gets left behind. That is the rule. Daniel felt something fierce and grateful rise in his chest. Then let us show them why humans do not quit. What followed was chaos and violence, and the kind of desperate fighting that Daniel had thought he left behind in the cell. The humans fought like cornered animals, using every tactic they knew. Ashara fought beside them, her dragon fire turning guards to ash. Her civilized princess facade burned away to reveal someone just as fierce as her warrior siblings. Daniel took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, protecting Ashara from a sniper. The pain was incredible, but he stayed on his feet through sheer will. Ashara screamed his name through the bond and through her throat, and her rage transformed her. She shifted into her true dragon form, massive and terrifying, scales gleaming like purple armor. She roared a challenge that shook the hangar walls. The guards hesitated, confronted with a member of the royal family in full combat form defending humans. That hesitation cost them. The prisoners made it to the ship. Ashara, still in dragon form, followed them up the ramp. Daniel came last, blood pouring from his shoulder, his vision blurring. The scarred woman pulled him inside as the ship's engines roared to life. Through the closing ramp, Daniel saw more guards arriving, saw the hangar shields trying to activate to trap them. But the pilot, one of the other prisoners who had experience with alien technology, slammed the ship through the closing gap with inches to spare. They were free. They were in space. And behind them, alarms screamed as the Imperial flagship realized what had just happened. Daniel collapsed against the wall, his shoulder bleeding freely. Ashara shifted back to her humanoid form and fell to her knees beside him. You are hurt. Why did you take that shot? Because you matter more than I do, Daniel said. His words slurred. The princess who chose mercy over empire. You are worth protecting. Idiot, Ashara said. But he could feel her love through the bond now, raw and undeniable. You stupid, brave, impossible human. Yeah, Daniel agreed. But I am your stupid human. That has to count for something. The ship shook as pursuit vessels opened fire. They were not safe yet. They might never be safe again. But as Daniel looked around at the freed prisoners, at Ashara with her scales still flickering with battle rage, at the stars visible through the cockpit windows, he felt something he had not felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope. They were alive. They were free, and together, maybe they could survive whatever came next. Refuge Station hung in neutral space like a broken crown, massive and chaotic and gloriously free from Imperial authority. Daniel woke in a clinic that smelled of antiseptic and alien chemistry, his shoulder wrapped in bandages that glowed faintly with healing compounds. Ashara sat beside his bed, her scales dulled with exhaustion, her hand wrapped around his. 3 days, she said when she noticed he was awake. You have been unconscious for 3 days. The medic said the plasma bolt nearly killed you. If you had been fully human, it would have. Fully human. Daniel's voice came out rough. What does that mean? The bond mark. It shares some of my biology with you now, enough to help you heal faster, to survive injuries that would kill normal humans. The medic was fascinated. Ashara managed a weak smile. He asked if he could publish a paper about it. I told him no. Daniel tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through his shoulder. The others? The prisoners? Safe. Most have left to find transport back to Earth-controlled space. A few stayed. They want to help with what comes next. Ashara helped him ease back against the pillows. The scarred woman, her name is Patricia. She said humans do not abandon their own. She said that includes me now since I fought beside you. She is right. Daniel squeezed Ashara's hand. You are one of us now. Honorary human. We are terrible at paperwork but good at loyalty. Ashara laughed, but it turned into a sob. I destroyed everything. My family has declared me a traitor. My father has increased the bounty on my head. I cannot go home. I cannot go back. Everything I knew is gone. I know. Daniel pulled her closer with his good arm. I lost my home too, remember? My family, my world, everything I knew. It hurts, it will keep hurting. But you are not alone in it. How do you survive it? How do you keep going when everything is gone? You find new things to care about, new people to protect, new reasons to keep breathing. Daniel met her golden eyes. You saved my life, Ashara. You gave up everything to do the right thing. That is worth surviving for. You are worth surviving for. Ashara buried her face against his chest, careful of his injured shoulder. Through the bond, Daniel felt her grief and fear and slowly growing hope. They stayed like that for a long time, two refugees holding each other in a clinic on a neutral station, while the galaxy kept turning around them. Recovery took weeks. Daniel learned to use his wounded shoulder again through painful physical therapy. Ashara learned to navigate a station where no one cared about her royal title, and everyone expected her to work for food and shelter. They found a tiny apartment in the lower levels, shared with two other refugees from different species. It was cramped and loud and nothing like the luxury of the royal wing. Ashara loved it. Daniel watched her discover freedom in small ways, choosing her own clothes, cooking her own meals, speaking her mind without fear of her father's disapproval. She took a job as a translator at the station's diplomatic center. Daniel worked security, using his military training to protect merchants and travelers. They were nobody special, just two more refugees trying to survive. One evening, 2 months after their escape, Ashara came home with news. There is a message. From Earth. They are asking for anyone with knowledge of Draconid military tactics to make contact. They want to establish formal negotiations. She hesitated. They specifically mentioned you. Someone from your old unit survived. They told Earth's command about the soldier who was captured, about the demon. Daniel sat very still. They want me to come home. Yes, to help with the war effort. To share what you know. Ashara's scales flickered with colors he could not read. You should go. You should help your people. And you? What will you do? I will stay here. I will keep working. Keep learning to be something other than a princess. You do not need me anymore, Daniel. The bond will remain, but you are free to— No. Daniel stood and crossed to her. Ashara, I need to tell you something. When your father asked if I loved you, I said to ask me in a year. I lied, I knew then. I knew when you begged me to marry you. I knew when you risked everything to save someone you barely knew. I knew when you fought beside me in that hangar. He took her hands in his. I love you. Not because of the bond. Not because you saved me, but because you are fierce and kind and brave enough to choose what is right over what is easy. You are the best person I know. Ashara's scales blazed with color, cycling through emotions too fast to follow. You love me? I really do. So when I go back to Earth, you are coming with me. As my wife, not my captor, not my savior. My partner, my choice. Daniel smiled. Besides, Earth could use someone who understands Draconid culture. Someone who can help build peace instead of just winning a war. That is you, Ashara. That has always been you. Your people will hate me. I am the enemy. Some will. Others will see what I see. Someone who gave up everything to do the right thing. Someone who risked her life to save prisoners she did not have to care about. Someone who chose love over empire. Daniel pulled her close. We will face it together. Humans and honorary humans against the world. Ashara kissed him, and Daniel felt the bond surge with connection and love and absolute certainty. They had both lost everything. They had both been prisoners in different ways. But together, they had found something neither had expected: freedom, partnership, and a love that had grown from desperation into something real and strong. Earth's negotiation team arrived at Refuge Station 3 weeks later. Patricia came with them, now wearing a captain's insignia. She embraced Daniel like a brother, nodded respectfully to Ashara. The war is turning, she said. We are winning battles, but the cost is too high. Command wants peace talks. They want someone who understands both sides to help facilitate. She looked between them. They want both of you. The talks took place on a neutral world, in a building designed to make no species feel more important than another. Daniel and Ashara stood together as representatives from Earth, and a growing Draconid rebellion faction met for the first time. The tension was incredible. Centuries of Draconid expansion and months of brutal war had left scars on both sides. "Why should we trust any Draconid?" a human admiral demanded. "They invaded our world, killed our people." "Because not all Draconids support the Empire," Ashara said calmly. "Because some of us have been fighting the endless conquest from within. Because I am living proof that change is possible." She touched the bond mark on Daniel's shoulder, visible through his shirt. "This human has every reason to hate my people. He was tortured, imprisoned, nearly executed, but he learned to see me as a person, rather than an enemy. If he can do that, surely we can all try." An assassin tried to kill Ashara during the talks, a Draconid loyalist who saw her as a traitor to everything the Empire stood for. Daniel saw the weapon rising and moved without thinking, putting himself between the blade and his wife. The knife struck him in the side and pain exploded through his body. Ashara's scream shook the building. She transformed into her dragon form, massive and terrifying, but she did not attack. Instead, she curved her body around Daniel, shielding him with scales like armor, and roared a challenge at everyone in the room. Her voice was amplified by the bond, carrying not just sound but emotion. Protective fury, desperate love, absolute commitment to the man bleeding on the floor beneath her. The human delegation saw one of their own defended by a dragon. The Draconid rebels saw a princess displaying the ancient virtue their species was built on: fierce protection of chosen family. Both sides were forced to confront something they had been trying to ignore. The lines between enemy and ally were not as clear as they wanted them to be. Daniel survived. Humans were hard to kill. Something the Draconids had learned well. The assassin was taken into custody, and somehow, impossibly, the talks continued. Not because everyone suddenly trusted each other, but because Ashara and Daniel had proven that change was possible, that love could exist across enemy lines, that choosing peace was not weakness but the hardest kind of strength. The war did not end immediately. Wars never did. But a ceasefire was established. Diplomatic channels opened. Prisoners on both sides were exchanged. The Draconid Empire did not collapse, but it began to change slowly and painfully, guided by rebels who had found courage in Ashara's example. 6 months after the negotiations began, Daniel and Ashara stood on Earth's surface for the first time as free people. The city around them showed scars from the invasion, buildings half destroyed and being rebuilt, memorials for the fallen, but also gardens planted in bomb craters and murals painted on damaged walls. Humans refused to let destruction have the final word. They built and healed and hoped for better. "It is beautiful," Ashara said softly. "Broken but beautiful." "That is humanity," Daniel agreed. "We survive, we rebuild, we keep going. Sometimes out of spite, sometimes out of hope, always out of stubborn refusal to quit." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "Thank you for seeing that. For seeing me as worth saving when you did not have to." "You saved me too," Ashara said. "From a life where I would have become someone I hated. From an empire built on conquest and cruelty, you gave me freedom and choice and love. That is worth more than any throne." They stood together as the sun set over a healing earth, their bond pulsing with shared emotion. Around them, humans and a few Draconid refugees moved through the streets, building something new from the ashes of war. Children played near a memorial, their laughter defiant and joyful. An elderly woman sold flowers grown in reclaimed soil. A musician played on a corner, his instrument made from salvaged ship parts. "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked. "Asking me to marry you that night in the cell?" Ashara thought about it seriously. She had lost her family, her home, her position. She had become an exile and a traitor to everything she had been raised to believe. She had nearly died multiple times. She would never be welcome in the Empire again. She touched the bond mark on Daniel's shoulder, now surrounded by new scars from plasma bolts and knives, and smiled. "No," she said. "I would do it again. I would beg you to marry me 1,000 times if it meant standing here with you now. Free. Together. Home." "Home," Daniel repeated. "Yeah, this is home now. For both of us." He kissed her as the last light faded from the sky. 2 refugees, 2 survivors, 2 people who had found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build something better. The bond mark on his shoulder glowed faintly. symbol of a marriage that began in desperation and grew into something neither had expected. Love, partnership, hope. The future was uncertain, peace was fragile, and there would be more struggles ahead, but they would face it together. A human who refused to break and a draconid who refused to be complicit. The demon and the dragon, the prisoner and the princess, Daniel and Ashara, partners in defiance and architects of change. Around them, Earth healed. Above them, stars shone in patterns that connected worlds and species and possibilities, and in the space between heartbeats through a bond forged in fire and desperation. Two people who should have been enemies chose each other again and again. That was humanity's greatest strength, Daniel thought, not weapons or tactics or stubborn refusal to surrender. It was the ability to look at someone completely different, someone who should have been an enemy and choose to see a person worth saving, worth loving, worth building a future with. Ashara had seen that in him when she begged him to marry her. He had seen it in her when he said yes, and together, they had proven that even in the darkest times, even in the middle of war and loss and exile, love was possible, choice was possible, hope was possible. They walked home through a healing city, hand in hand as Earth spun beneath them and the universe watched to see what humans and their allies would build next. The answer, Daniel thought, would surprise everyone, because humans did not just survive, they thrived. And now with partners like Ashara beside them, they would build something better than any empire. They would build a future worth the cost.